Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts. Welcome to this week's edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, Accountable to You, the show that takes a good hard look at government here in Winstead and asks the simple question, would you choose a different one next time around? As a reminder, the views expressed on the show are those of myself, James Roberts. They do not reflect those of the Winchester Board of Education, which is increasingly coming to see me as an abomination, or those of the Gilbert School Corp, both of which organizations I sit on. 4 topics for discussion this evening. Firstly, an update on the audit process. Secondly, an update on MBR funding. Thirdly, an update on the forthcoming budget, and then we'll have a quick review of the rather startling decision by the school board to recommend spending $40 million of your money. First of all, the audit. Firstly, an apology. I have been guilty of spreading misinformation on this program. I have been telling you consistently that the audit for 10-11 would be complete by today. That is not, in fact, the truth. It is not complete, and we don't know when it will be complete. Now, this is not an excuse, but the reason I've been telling you this is because I was told that by the Board of Ed chair. And perhaps naively, I took her at her word, assuming that after 11 searing months of not being able to produce a 9-10 audit, that this time around she would have the information at her fingerprints. I don't know when the audit will be complete. The cynic in me says that it will be complete only when the feds and the state of Connecticut determine what to do with the question costs that arose out of the last audit. The cynic in me suggests that if the state decides that we did wrong, then our audit will be forthcoming pretty quickly, along with the bad news that we did wrong again. Conversely, if the state decides that we did no wrong, it's just human error, no great matter, then again the audit will be forthcoming pretty quickly, with again a small comment that human error continues, but it's no big problem. This is purely my cynical view, ladies and gentlemen. I have no idea which way this is going to go. The state and the feds continue to examine the question cost issue, which again the cynic in me says is simply a reflection of the fact that this is proving rather harder to whitewash than anyone first expected. What has been made clear is the state has demanded that we amend our 9-10 numbers once again. So we now have issued 6 different sets of numbers for 9-10. 4 ED001s, all of them certified by the superintendent. 1 affidavit in the Litchfield Superior Court, sworn under oath. And then there's the audit itself. 6 different sets of numbers, all of them different. I think the one thing that we can all be clear on, that whenever the audit is settled, whenever the question costs are settled, is that we need to commission a fresh audit specifically of the Board of Education. It is not good enough to simply know that we spent $23.5 million to have a one-line answer buried in a town audit. We need to know exactly where each and every one of those $23.5 million was spent. What were they spent on? Without an audit, there can be no controls. Without controls, there can be no accountability. We must know what the money was spent on, so that we can know whether it was spent wisely, so that we can know whether to spend it the same way going forward. Which brings us to topic number 2, the equally long-running saga of the MBR funding. This week, the Board of Selectmen met, and this week they set aside some $720,000 towards the $1.3 million that they have committed to provide the schools. Attorney Nelligan was on hand for this meeting, and when asked directly, was the legal requirement to pay this money a reflection of actions taken by the board or a reflection of actions taken by the state, he confirmed, albeit rather grumpily, that yes, the legal requirement to spend this money, to make this money available to the schools, emanates not from the state's demand that we spend the money, but simply from the supermajority Democrat decision in November of last year to acknowledge and agree to spend the money. The decision was not taken without some degree of discussion. A member of the public had the temerity to suggest this should go to referendum. This, after all, directly contradicts what you, the taxpayers, voted on at the last budget referendum. Mayor Welcome was having none of that. I think she assumes that having had the good grace to agree to a second public comment in the Board of Selectmen agenda, that it is just about all of the interference from the public that she is willing to accept. This is, after all, her government, ladies and gentlemen, not yours. A member of the minority party in the Board of Selectmen suggested that rather than emptying the fund balance, rather than defunding the town, if the board was so inclined to make this 1.3 available, that they should do so via a supplemental tax. Again, Mayor Welcome refused to be drawn, refused to make any comment whatsoever on that notion. Deputy Mayor Perez, perhaps unwisely, did wade into the fray with a stupendous intellectual argument that we should do it this way because we've always done it this way, which is perhaps why we have no fund balance. And so the Board of Selectmen set aside 720 plus or minus, I may have the number slightly wrong, which obviously is a far cry from the 1.3 that up till now they have been saying they will make available. Again, no one was willing to be drawn as to what that difference really was. But I think we all know that it's the question costs, the $636,000 of question costs that may have to be repaid to the federal authorities. Mayor Welcome has never expressly agreed that her position is that should that money be repaid to the federal government, it will be subtracted from the Board of Education. She, after all, campaigned, she ran on a program which said the full 1.3 will be paid to the schools, irrespective of what the audit said, irrespective of the town's ability to pay. But again, I think we all understand that if monies are due to be repaid to the federal government, that will come out of the Board of Education. And from the community's perspective, that is not a stupid answer. That is probably the right answer. But consider this, ladies and gentlemen. The Board of Education has been spending as if it will get the full $1.3 million. They have not been doing so in secrecy. They announced their intention of doing so publicly in August. They confirmed with the state that they were doing so. They confirmed with the Board of Selectmen that they were doing so. Every financial report produced by the Board of Education since then has demonstrated that they are doing so. If there is a cut in relation to any of the question costs, we will hear a giant sucking sound. The giant sucking sound of a deficit emanating from the Board of Education. But it is important to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that that deficit was not run up in secret. It was run up at the express request, at the express direction of the 5 supermajority Democratic members of the Board of Selectmen. A direction expressed both when they were candidates for office, throughout last summer and fall, and immediately after they took up office. If there is a deficit by virtue of question costs being needed to repay the federal government, that deficit will have been caused by your Board of Selectmen, or at least the Democratic majority of them. Don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, the decision to spend the 1.3 is not one that I have supported or would have supported, but it was made publicly at the direction of Mayor Welcome. Which brings us to the town budget. The town budget will be presented to the Board of Selectmen next week, I guess. Ordinarily, I would have anticipated we would know more about the town budget, but apparently it is a secret. We do not know what is going to be in there. There have been a variety of suggestions as to what will be in there, which amount to a veritable laundry list, a wish list of peculiar interests. We know we should start with the 0.8 of a mil that the schools have already asked for. We understand, in addition to that, that there will be substantial increases for equipment, for public works, for police, and for fire. That there will be substantial increases for road work. We've had the slightly bizarre idea of purchasing the Northwest Community Bank building on Main Street. That'll cost us $1 million. To convert into a police station, that'll probably cost us $3 to $5 million. And then there's the 50 or so mils that the schools would like to spend on a new building. This adds up to some pretty big numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't know whether Mayor Welcome and Deputy Mayor Perez are suddenly feeling rich. I don't know whether they're feeling that you all are equally rich or equally willing to open your pocketbooks and pay more taxes. Perhaps they have forgotten that unlike them, many of the people here in Winsted do not survive on the public dime. They are not paid out of public tax dollars. They do not get a pay raise every year in and year out. Perhaps this laundry list is rather reflective of the backroom deals and promises that were made during the election. Perhaps this is the coming home to roost of ill-advised promises made to special interest groups in advance of an election to secure the right vote. I don't know. Or perhaps this is simply an acknowledgement by Mayor Welcome that as difficult as this budget season will be, it'll be as nothing compared to next budget season once the reval has come and gone. As everyone knows, ladies and gentlemen, this is a revaluation year. All of your homes will be revalued. We know that the downtown properties are going to experience a dramatic decline in value. For example, the Northwest Community Bank that members of the Democratic Party rather quixotically wish to purchase is on the market at a 25% discount to its current assessed value. We have seen those areas of downtown, particularly struck by foreclosures, experience price decreases in the 35 to 45% range. Outside of town, prices are somewhere between down a little, flat, up a little. What all of this translates into is a dramatic shift in the tax burden from downtown properties to properties in the outlying areas. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, put bluntly, is that next time around, not this budget, but next budget, a zero increase tax budget will be felt by a majority of taxpayers as a large increase. The simple transferal of tax liability will mean that in order to get to a flat tax experience, the budget will need to be cut. Perhaps that is why Marianne Welcome is contemplating loading the kitchen sink and everything in between into this year's budget. We shall just have to see, because we don't know what will be presented. Which brings us to the final subject, the subject of the school buildings. I think you are all aware, this time last year, the Board of Education provided a budget in writing which said they will close a building. Board of Ed Chair Susan Hofnagel now denies that a commitment to close a building was actually made. But I think you and I and everyone else understood that budget to be a commitment to close a building. And what we know is that no building has been closed. Last Christmas, the new Board of Education formulated a facilities review committee, or something along those lines, which was directed to answer a very specific question. Should the Board of Education close one or more buildings? If so, which? If so, when? Now, at some point between then, last Christmas, and now, that committee decided that that was not an especially exciting question to answer. It was not an attractive question to answer. That the question they preferred to answer was not whether we should close a building, if so which, and if so when, but whether we should spend tens of millions of dollars on buildings, if so which, and if so when. Last Saturday, the Facilities Review Committee presented its report to the Board of Education, in which it argued that we should, at a cost of $40 million, tear down Pearson in order to rebuild Pearson, to rebuild it smaller, because Pearson's too big. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The conclusion was we should tear down Pearson and rebuild it only smaller, and that would cost a mere $40 million. So let's review the options that have been on the table on this question. We started out a year ago with the notion that we would close a school and save money. That became an alternative version once the Board of Education realized that that would result in a reduction in the MBR. And alternative number two became, if you pay us an extra $2 to $3 million, we'll close a building. And that, over the course of a year, became, if you pay us $40 million, we'll think about closing buildings. 3 options. Frankly, I prefer what lies behind door number 1. Close a building, save some money. In the context of a tough budget, in the context of declining enrollment, that seems like a very attractive option. Now, the school board has a report which explains their thinking. There's always a report, ladies and gentlemen. It's part of the price we pay. I'm not going to go through the report in detail. There are issues with the report, certainly, although much work was done, much of it good. The central argument presented by the report is that taking into account reimbursement from the state, the option of tearing down Pearson and rebuilding it is cheaper than every other option, including the option of simply fixing Pearson. That is the central tenet of the report. And the chief driver of that argument is the fact that unlike Winchester, which is quite content to pour millions of dollars into empty buildings, the state of Connecticut is not. Should we choose to renovate Pearson, given its current student load, the state of Connecticut is going to make a very small contribution to that effort. Should, by contrast, we rebuild Pearson, tear it down and rebuild it for the entire student body, the state will view that as a better use of funds. The state likes the idea of full buildings. It does not like the idea of contributing to empty buildings. This is the argument that the report makes. Those of you who are following closely will see the central flaw in this argument. The question is not, should we rather tear down and rebuild Pearson as a full school or fix Pearson as an empty school? The argument should have been, should we move all the kids into Pearson and fix it? Or should we move all the kids into Pearson and tear it down? That would have yielded, I think, a quite different answer. Now again, those of you who watch this program regularly are probably wondering why I am not foaming at the mouth at this point. The report, I am not suggesting that the Board of Ed contrived the report to come out with the right answer, although it's mighty convenient that it did. But the simple fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is the report doesn't matter very much. James DeVita, member of the Board of Selectmen, member of the Town Board of Finance, put it best, I think. He attended the meeting this Saturday when the Facilities Review Committee provided their recommendations. He stood up, and I will paraphrase him. He said, "I have not actually read this report, but I agree wholeheartedly with its conclusions. We should join hands and spend the $40 million. I have not actually read the report." Ladies and gentlemen, can someone please tell Mr. DeVita that his job as a member of the Board of Finance of this town is to read the report before he opens his mouth? Can someone please tell him that his job is to look at the facts and arguments and make a reasoned determination rather than simply joining hands and jumping off the cliff with $40 million of taxpayer dollars stuffed into his pockets? Now, I am not suggesting that the rest of the Board of Education was quite as cavalier as Mr. DeVita. But it was pretty clear that they were following an agenda which was not that as laid out in the report. The word that kept coming up in our deliberations was the word deserve. We deserve a new school. The kids deserve a new school. The teachers deserve a new school. The paras deserve a new school. The administrators deserve a new school. The parents deserve a new school. And this last one was said unsaid. The taxpayers deserve a $40 million tax bill. Is that what you deserve, ladies and gentlemen? Or do you deserve to have active steps taken to begin to fix our school system? Several weeks ago, Governor Malloy formally announced that Winchester school system was among the bottom 30 in the state. The bottom 30. And it wasn't because of the buildings. We all know what factors correlate to a successful school system. Good teachers in the classroom engaging their students individually. Parents in the home pushing their children to do more. Broad community involvement, broad community support that goes beyond simply paying taxes. That means active involvement in the school community. A community being proud of its schools. These are hard things to do, ladies and gentlemen, although these are the things that successful school districts do every single day, trying each day to do them better. But the Board of Education has chosen to opt for the silver bullet, the easy pill to take that cures all ailments. It costs a lot, it costs $40 million, but it'll work, trust me. It's a new school. That's going to solve everything. You and I know that school buildings don't teach kids. Teachers teach kids. Other kids teach kids. Parents teach kids. Kids teach each other. Kids learn from the trials and triumphs of everyday life under the supportive guidance of people who care. That's what teaches kids. That's what makes a good school system, not buildings. This is a classic case of Board of Education overreach. It's what they do, certainly what they have done, time and time and time again. They overreach in terms of what they ask for. They underdeliver in terms of what they produce. When caught out in that essential problem, they resort to secrecy and subterfuge. And then when the community proves to be less than wholly enthusiastic about raising increased taxation on their behalf, they complain. This was a perfect opportunity to begin to realign the system, to begin to rally the population behind something which seems to make sense. We all understand, like the state of Connecticut understands, you shouldn't pour money into empty buildings. An opportunity wasted, ladies and gentlemen. There's tough sledding ahead. We don't know what's going to be in the town budget, but based on the rumors swirling around town, it's going to be pretty big. The Board of Education, in my view, has substantially overplayed its hand in saying that it deserves a building. I think it has essentially thrown away the chance to get anything much out of this year's budget. The Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, seems to have abdicated responsibility completely. I haven't read the report, but I recommend we jump off the cliff. We need better, ladies and gentlemen. We need a better answer than we deserve a school building. We want a new school. We would like to see the Chris Royer Dancing Gymnasium. We would like to see the Susan Hofnagel Hall of Humanities. The kids deserve it. We'd all like to give everything to the schools. I would like to see the schools taking field trips to Paris, Peking, Rio de Janeiro, Cape Town. It would do them good. But the simple fact of the matter is that's not going to happen because we don't have the money. A school building, absent all other problems in town, in the context of infinite amounts of money, will be an excellent thing to have. I'd certainly like to have a new school building. But that's just not one of the options. We need to focus on what goes on inside the school building, not on the building itself. Once again, I haven't read the report, but we should spend the money. We should jump off that cliff hand in hand with our pockets bulging with taxpayer dollars. I think you deserve more, ladies and gentlemen. I think we all deserve more. Thank you very much. Good night. And we look forward to an interesting budget season coming up here in Winston.